Okay, you're now tuned in to the Transition Game podcast. I'm your host, Rodney Williams, and I'm the founder of Athlete to Boardroom. Today, I have a special guest. He's my brother. He's a mentor. He's a Richmond basketball legend, somebody that I look up to, and obviously has transitioned well in his career to being a financial advisor. So I'd like to welcome to the show, Maurice Carter. How you doing, Mo?
Good, man.
Good, brother. I appreciate you joining us, man. Taking time out of your day.
Yes, sir. Been a long day, but anything for you, my guy.
I appreciate that. So, as we know, the Transition Game podcast is to bring awareness to, what it means to transition after the game. You've done a fantastic job of that, and been a role model to a lot of young athletes who've seen you do that. And so today we're going to talk about that, but I love to start in that early, that early beginning. Tell us a little bit about your life, where you grew up, how you grew up, and then how you got to basketball.
Yeah, man. It's just I was just a little guy, right? Just typical kid. Born and raised here in Richmond. I played little league basketball. Started playing when I was 6 years old, and my first love was football, which is kind of funny. But I think everybody kind of knows this. I played at Highland Springs High School here for 2 years. AAU basketball with Squires and Richmond, just the normal stuff. Growing up as a kid. And then I kind of transitioned to high school basketball at DeMatha Catholic High School in Hyattsville, Maryland as a junior. Graduated at Eleanor Roosevelt in Greenbelt, Maryland. But everything was kind of just, very normal. And then, I just kind of took off as a middle school and high school kid.
I didn't know you I thought you finished all at Highland Springs. I didn't know you went to DeMatha.
No, so looking back, man, exactly. I played with a guy named Jonathan Hargreaves, who was an incredible high school basketball player. And we kind of started that whole, blue chip, transferring to different high schools. But we both played at Highland Springs as freshmen. Started as freshmen, kind of took the whole thing by surprise, by storm.
Yeah.
Number one high school basketball team in the state of Virginia as a freshman and sophomore. So played with great players, man. I was fortunate and lucky,
Yeah.
which a lot of us are, right?
So, and then you played with, so I played Squires too. I played Squires all the way from 14 to 17s with Tony and Mac and all them over there. And it
hmm
was great for that's how I got to St. Chris in the prep school route and then ultimately getting all these college offers. So, did playing with Squires like influence some of that, like going to DeMatha and then just your career overall, or?
Of course, man. That program meant everything to all of us, right? I started off playing with Richmond Metro Gold as a younger kid, but as I got older and better, right, Squires, the name speaks for itself. And so Tony did do a lot for me and my family. That team I played on as a sophomore, we were the number one team in the country. I don't think we lost the AAU basketball game. It was accumulated of a bunch of guys from Richmond, right? But you know how it goes. Having those important figures in your life as a young kid was really important. And Tony has always done what he's done for all of us. That makes sense.
Not for sure. Shout out to Tony Squire, man. He's left an impact on a lot of players around the Richmond area.
hmm
And so kind of sticking into high school a little bit. Obviously you went through that process of Highland Springs, played with great players, moved to Matha up in the DMV. So what was that like? Just moving from Richmond, that basketball scene coming up to the DMV, obviously knowing where basketball is heavy. Was that a transition for your game? Did you have to adjust? And then what did that bring you when you're kind of looking at getting to college and getting recruited?
Yeah, that's a great question. So culturally, man, you moving from Richmond to
Mhm.
DC, right? Hyattsville is right on that border of DC. So just yeah, I was like a deer in the headlights. But from a basketball standpoint, the Math is a powerhouse, always has been. And going from being a huge fish in a small pond, right, to now playing with other guys who look like you and play like you. So, for a while I struggled there because I had to change the way I played. I wasn't around any of my friends and all those things. The 15-year-old, high school kid, it was a lot. But I think the family dynamic at the math that kind of helped me transition to now I'm comfortable and here we go. So yeah, it was a huge shock at first, and it took a lot of adjusting and getting used to. But after a while, I was comfortable.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, like when you go to schools like that and you have, multiple NBA guys on one team and a lot of different pros at different levels, you have to find a way to play. And we'll talk about that, but you kind of mentioned it, kind of figure out how to play. And a lot of guys don't understand that. Like, just thinking about European experience, you got four Americans on one team. Not everybody's going to average 20 points, right? Like If you
Hmm.
different ways to communicate and play with different guys, especially the higher the levels you go, your game has to change. And
Hmm.
ultimately it ends up being the same when you get to business, right? Like the higher you go, you got to adjust your game. And so we're definitely going to get to some of that. But I love the fact that you were able to play at such great levels. And when you think about levels, you now got to Robert Morris, where you played your college ball. What was that like? Did they find you at a tournament? What was that recruiting process like? And then what made you choose Robert Morris?
Yeah, my assistant coach, well, the head coach was assistant coach at Xavier, and they were kind of recruiting me there. When he got the head coaching job at Robert Morris, um, he's like, obviously the ball is yours. There was an adjustment period for me also because people here at Robert Morris, especially back in early 2000, you're like, man, this is low level basketball. I'm not supposed to be here. I'm gonna kill, but it was still Division I basketball. So the guys were older, stronger. Huge adjustment period for me. But that's kind of where my game grew. My assistant coach, his name is Eddie Benton. He was a phenomenal college basketball player as well. He was from Pittsburgh. He kind of held my hand through that process. My freshman year, I had a good freshman year, but my sophomore year is kind of where I took off. Had a 40-point game that year. We did some really good stuff. So those college teammates are like lifelong friends. So having
Absolutely.
having all that stuff around me kind of helped me mature and grow, which I think a lot of guys lack if you're not on a college campus as an 18, 19-year-old kid.
What was your welcome to college basketball moment? I know I got up there, you know how you go in the summer, you go for summer school. And in Philly, I went to Drexel, obviously. Playing pickup. Everybody comes to Drexel because we're the school that's open all year round. So you get all the pro guys. We had the Morris twins in there, Dion Waiters, a bunch of guys. And I ain't gonna lie, the Marcus Morris scored like 11 straight points on me. And that was my moment where I was like, this is not high school. Like, if you want to play at a higher levels, like you got to bring it every day and adjust your game. So when you
Hmm.
were, getting to Robert Morris, did you have any of those moments where it's like, hey, welcome to college basketball. I need to adjust?
Yeah, and it didn't happen for me really until my sophomore season. So I had a lot of success as a younger, typically you don't play as a freshman and sophomore at that level, right? But I was a higher level guy, right? My sophomore year, I broke our school scoring record, right? The very next night, we play University of Missouri, Kansas City in Kansas City. So I'm on a high horse.
Yeah, yeah.
There was a guard there named Michael Watson. I'll never forget him. He's probably the best guard I've ever played against. My coach came over to me before the game. He said, "Hey, you got your hands full tonight." I'm like, "Man, I just scored 40 last night." This dude scored 36 points in 30 minutes. I could not guard him, yo.
Uh-huh.
And he was like the state high jump, he was a track guy. So he was super fast, super athletic. He was getting around me, dunking the ball. I'm like, and that was my humbling. I'm like, you know what? Every night. And nobody knew who UMKC was. We like, man, we're going faster. I was like, yo, every night you got to be, ready to play at that level.
It's funny because I think at all athletes at some point go through that, no matter what it is. And I just even remember now we played Southern Miss at Southern Miss. We were coming off of playing Arizona and Alabama at the Garden, and we lost Arizona overtime. We beat Alabama, so I'm thinking like, oh, it's not that bad. And then we got to Southern Miss, and they had like mostly JUCO players, and
Hmm.
just strong, like just stronger than me. Me in my eyes, like, yo, I'm stronger than you. So
Man,
I'm
yeah.
good, I'm good. But my coach was like, you're gonna have to play strong tonight, or you can't play in this game. And
Hmm.
I tell you, like, I looked at my teammate at the end of the game is like, we need to go lift. Like, this just always
Oh,
that moment where you have that skill, but again, like at any new level, requires you to tap into something else. And so,
mhm.
you always have those moments, but you obviously had an incredible career at Robert Morris. I think you broke some scoring records. You ended up on the all-time list. I don't know. That was what, 2006, so maybe it's changed. I don't know if it's changed or not, but talk to me about like memorable moments in your Robert Morris career.
Yeah, man. Obviously blessed and fortunate, right? A big group of my teammates were like really like just welcoming, right? And so I think for me, my senior night, my mom and dad being able to come and see me, as a senior. Pittsburgh is 9 hours away from Richmond.
Yep.
Um, and then obviously breaking the school record in scoring and then rebounding, right? As a smaller guard, you don't get a lot of rebounds. I also had 8 rebounds that night, and I remember that. And that was a huge thing for me. But just seeing, my success and how it affected my teammates, my brothers, all those things, and then also seeing my teammates' success. I think a lot of us, as older men now, we still have some of those same lifelong friends, and we still talk about it to today. One of my good friends, his name is Chaz McCrummon. He was actually the other guy, I think honorable mention All American there with me. He's from Pittsburgh. I used to go to his barbershop and get my hair cut in Pittsburgh. He was the only guy with a car. I remember all of that stuff in early 2000. For me, those are lifelong memories that I'll never forget. But from a basketball standpoint, man, we had a lot of, success there just because we had a lot of guys who weren't supposed to be there, right? And so we started that whole trend. I think we upset Kentucky a couple of years later, but we started that whole niche of us having guys who could play at a higher level.
At what point did you realize that you could take this game to the pro level? Because you played, I think you had a decorated career of 10 plus years. You played in multiple countries and different teams at a high level. So did it start setting in at that sophomore age where you started to make some headway, or was it, to your junior, senior year where you said, hey, I can take this thing to the next level?
Yeah, man, I think just being consumed with being the best basketball player possible, right? So you just locked in my sophomore year after that game, we always watch film. And, coach talks about your body language and all that other stuff. I'm watching film with him, and Jerry Krause is sitting right behind our bench. And my coach is like, you know who that is? And I'm like, no. He tells me it hit me then, because that's the guy that drafted Michael Jordan and all that good stuff. And I'm like, I possibly could have a chance, right? But it takes a lot of luck and an opportunity and placement for you to take your game. That's the top, I guess, 1% of guys who play at the pro level, any level. So I realized that I didn't know it was going to come the way it came until you're there, right? Because you're doing all the work. So, but all of us kind of think we can do it, at some point, especially playing at that level.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, talk about that transition point. Was it senior year? Did you just grab an agent? Did calls start coming in? What was that process of actually getting overseas, or getting to the D League? I know you played in the D League too, but there's a lot of guys that's going to watch this or hear about it. They just want to know, like, how do they even start to think about, being a pro?
Yeah, so here in Richmond, obviously, everyone kind of knew who I was. So, agents started calling my mom and dad. It's different back in the early 2000s. I don't want to sound too old,
Yeah, yeah.
and everything has changed now from 20 years ago. But you know, I, I had 4 or 5 agents recruit me. I signed with one. I broke my ankle because I went to minicamp with the Washington Wizards, and I got sent to Houston with John Lucas, which was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was very humbling. There were already 20 pros down there, vet guys, and I had to learn how to work like a pro, right? So that whole summer, man, I'm getting in shape. I'm learning how to play the pro game, which I kind of had a head start. John Lucas is probably the best basketball mind, in my opinion, that I've ever seen at the pro game, right? And there are numerous guys who come through there and they talk about going to Lucas's camp. This dude had us backpedaling around the track, 3 miles. Yeah, it was crazy, right? And at that point, I went to minicamp with the San Antonio Spurs, did training camp with them. I got cut, and then I went to the G League, to a D League at the time. And then, you stay at the D League, the salaries were really low at the time. We're
Right.
talking 20, 30 grand before taxes. And I'm like, man, I need to go make some money. And so that's kind of how that transitioned from the D League into me playing in DR my first year, and then it just took off from there.
Any memorable moments just about, that NBA process, going through those workouts, being on those training camp teams and trying to pursue that next level? Did you see a lot of politics? Did were there, I mean, what was that like? Because I know a lot of guys don't even get that chance to even touch the league.
Yeah, so Gilbert Arenas is probably one of the most talented guys I've ever seen in person. And getting the chance to be in workouts with him at the time, I think it was calling him the hibachi or whatever it was.
Yeah,
He was unguardable. And I couldn't guard him. Nobody could guard him, right?
yeah.
And as young and as athletic as I thought I was at that level, that is the top tier. So being able to pick those guys' brains, just kind of learn what how they played and what they did, and then also seeing what it was like to be an NBA guy. from a financial standpoint. I'm like, geez, right? And then being in San Antonio with Tony Parker was there, Tim Duncan was there, Ginobili, Ime Udoka, who was a head coach, I think, for the Rockets now.
Mhm.
Being able to rub elbows with those guys and play against them, those are all memorable moments for me.
Yeah. So now, Shift, you decided to take the money route. Obviously, the salaries are better now in the G League, but back then, guys had to make that decision of, getting paid or not at a certain time. You decided to go overseas. You talked about the Dominican. There's obviously other countries that you played in over time. Talk to us about that experience. And even, you've played so long that you've seen it change, right? I know
Hmm.
some coaches told me back in the early 2000s, you know, contacting your family might have been, more difficult than it is now, where you're just picking up FaceTime, you're doing different things. And I'm not trying to age you, but just kind of
No, it's true. It's
talk
true.
about
No,
that
it's true.
process,
I
going
appreciate you
overseas.
gracefully transitioning into that. That was nice. But Skype was a big thing then, right? Before
Okay.
FaceTime and all that other stuff. So I still could talk to my family, but I was actually supposed to replace a guy, right? And
Yeah.
I think a lot of guys think they're going to go overseas your first year and make $100,000. I was making $800 a week, right? And for me, looking back, I'm like, man, that was nothing,
Yeah.
right? I was on the back of little mopeds going to practice. I really,
Yeah.
earned my stripes, right? And what happened for me is I played so well, the guy I was supposed to replace, he's supposed to come back. It was like, yo, we don't want you back. And we ended up winning a championship. And then the next year, I got Player of the Year in South America, and that kind of springboarded me to every other country that I wanted to go and play. The advice I can give any young guy going to Europe or going wherever you're going to play is grind, man, fall in love with it, and focus on winning. I think a lot of guys in today's game, especially with the advancement of social media,
Right.
they are very statistical driven, if that makes sense. I got to get stats, I got to get points. Now, you know this right about me. There's nobody wired more to score than I am, right? Or I was. But if it does not translate to you winning and being able to coexist with your teammates,
All for nothing.
you're out of there. So finding that happy medium and understanding like how that can work for you and your team is really important for young rookies and second year guys.
Talk about how important situation is. Because I think, we got a lot of dudes that are, even now still playing, but maybe you might be money chasing at a certain time when you should just be getting your foot in the door. Maybe you end up playing in Luxembourg, but now that you play in Luxembourg, you try to go to France, right? You don't get the money that you want. So how important is like assessing situation when you're trying to transition to the pro level?
It's super important because depending on your position and your situation, it can make you or break you. If your coach don't give you an opportunity to showcase what you really can do, you know how it goes. You go to an average 2 or 3 points, you're done.
Done.
And so I think it's very important for guys, instead of always taking the most money, taking the best position in those first couple years. Because now when you can prove what you can do, sky's the limit, right? You go take $5,000 more and don't play, you ain't never gonna get a job after that. And
Yeah.
so I think it's really important for guys to have an understanding of the business aspect of basketball. It's not just going between the lines and playing. Like, and we always hear it. It's about, all the other different variables that come along with it.
And I always like to have like a transparent conversation around overseas basketball. Obviously, we're both close to it. You played way longer than I did, but when it comes to like learning the landscape, salaries, contracts, benefits, do I get a car? Do I get this or that? There's a lot of lying that goes on, man.
Hmm.
Guys just,
Hmm.
lie about the situation, say it's one thing, and then when somebody actually gets in that situation, they're shocked, right?
Hmm.
Versus, having people that will actually normalize the conversation, help you understand how to get in the right situation so that you can set yourself up. And so I think it's important to have those conversations because the false advertisement is not good for anybody, and especially in a place in Europe where they don't really need you. You
Right,
can
right.
find they can
No
find
question.
a lot of you to replace, that position. So these conversations are super important.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we talked about money, right? Talked about contracts. You are now a financial advisor at New York Life. How did you get into that? Did you major in finance? What made you want to just take that next step to this
It's,
industry?
it's it's funny, man. I played for Richmond. I'm sorry, I played for New York Life in the Richmond Pro Am every summer. The gentleman who brought me to the business, his name is Every Fox, one of the best people you've ever met in your life, right? And he started poking at me those last couple of years. And when I thought of New York Life, I thought of life insurance. I'm like, man, I'm not, selling life insurance, right?
Mm.
Then when I started to understand how I could position myself and my family, I'm like, let me have a conversation. I think a lot of the relationships you build while you're playing basketball is super important because literally in my situation, it was a relationship I had through basketball that helped me transition into doing what I'm doing today. And we hear it all the time, man. Don't burn the bridges. Conduct yourself a certain type of way because everybody's watching. You don't know who's watching.
Yep.
And luckily, Fox and I had a great relationship, and the transition was smooth. I think for a lot of guys, the word we don't want to use is that we're scared. Because now, what am I going to do besides basketball? I played basketball since I've been 6 years old.
Yep.
Am I going to be as good at this as I was at basketball? And if I'm not, what am I going to do? Right. And so I didn't have a job. And it was for me, it was all or nothing. And so I literally put my head down and I studied to become, the financial services professional that I am today. Um, but I think also for a lot of us, a lot of the talents and attributes that we acquire as an athlete, we don't realize they translate to corporate America, right? Being
Yes.
disciplined, being, with all those things, right? And we don't use them. So I encourage all guys when you're done playing, start figuring out what you want to do in those last couple of years, and then lean on some of those relationships and leverage those things, so you can use them when you're done playing.
So, it's interesting that you say that. When did you know? Was the writing on the wall for you? Was there, some people their body breaks down, some people just make that they have a life change, but when did you know it was time to make that shift?
My daughter, I replaced a kid in France. I played in Turkey the year before. I was playing in Pro B France, and I would FaceTime my daughter. By this time, FaceTime had come along, right? And I would FaceTime her every day. And when I came home after those 3 months, she was maybe 2 or 3 years old. And I walked in and I'm like, Mila, I'm so excited to see her. And she looked at me like she didn't recognize me really. I went upstairs. I called my agent. I said, I'm done
Wow.
because my daughter I wanted to make sure I could be here for her as much as she needed me to. And I felt it, right? And you know this, Rod, about I could have played about 3 or 4 more years, but I'm
Mhm.
like, I'm done. It wasn't worth it at that point because, my children started showing up and I wanted to be as present as possible for them.
That's so I actually, as many guys as I've talked to, I never heard that come from somebody. It's typically other things, but it's so interesting how that aided your transition. And so when you had that feeling and you called your agent and you said you're done, you still made a huge decision, right? Regardless if it's for the right things, it's still tough. What were some of the things you were feeling like in that, I guess, that gray area of like, what am I going to do? Because now it's like all or nothing. I'm staying here for her, but I still have to figure out what I'm going to do for her. So,
Yeah, we touched on it earlier. You scared, you nervous,
yeah.
and you are like, man, what am I going to do if I can't make ends meet? And as basketball players, especially in Europe, you're receiving large amounts of money tax free, and I was used to getting paid like that. And so now, even when I transitioned to becoming an employee, technically, I'm getting taxed. All these other things are happening. It's a different dynamic. And so even not at the very beginning, but 2 or 3 years later, I'm like, man, should I go back and play again? Or right? You're trying to figure it out. It's not ever going to be I'm here today, I'm doing this the next day. It's a transition period, right? And you got to get comfortable with your own personal position, if that makes sense.
So talk to us just a little bit about your role now. What does the day to day look like? I think we've gotten a lot of interest from some of our other athletes that have been through an athlete to boardroom program, just about the different expertises. And you are one that I've seen do it really well. And so when you're displaying just being a financial advisor, working for New York Life, what does a day to day, look like for you? And then how could somebody get into the industry you're in?
Great question. So each day is different. I am a business owner now, and I pretty much make my own schedule. Um, but it can be, our company in particular, they want to hire athletes. It's like we talked about. We're very competitive, we're very driven, very disciplined, right? And it's a producer's paradise. But it's a different set of tools you need to learn how to use, if that makes sense. Um, I mean, if you're interested, man, I didn't have a background in finance, right? If you're interested, it's a very easy process. And it's also a relationship built business. I have two or three guys right now who play basketball who are in the hiring process with us right now from a referral from me, right? And so it's just automatically just making up what you want to do, if that makes sense. If you want to do it, you got to go in 10 toes in. There's no, a lot of guys want to do this. I want to do this part time and I want to do real estate. You can't do that. This is not a part time situation when you're managing people's money.
Yeah, I mean, so is there like any type of certification or test that you have to take to
A lot of them.
okay. Can you talk
A
about
lot
that?
of them. So I mean, I'm securities licensed. So your Series 6 and your Series 63 and 65 and 7, your life insurance license, your health insurance, your long term, all that stuff, annuities. There are various licenses you have to attain in order to be a financial services provider, and then your designation, right? And for me, I was able to compete outside of basketball, which really drew me to this particular industry. But then also understanding, you eat what you kill, right? There's no limitation on your income, and that's also really attractive to me. So all those different things made me want to transition into doing what I'm doing today.
Does somebody have to have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree to
Mhm.
be positioned? Nope.
Nope, I don't have mine. Nope.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who have their degrees, shout out to everybody who has them. They come into our work field with a sense of entitlement, right? I got my degree. I know more than everybody else. You don't want to be like that. I knew I didn't know anything about finances, right? And when I played, I made some bad decisions with my money also, which is why I'm so passionate about what I do today. I
Mhm.
understand the importance of it, right? And so come in with the mindset of learning, being coachable once again, and that'll take you a long way, in any situation, but that definitely in our business.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think we all, and something to say to people who are trying to figure out what they want to do. Like, just because you study something or did something doesn't mean you're going to fall into it. There's a lot of folks that are in different professions now, totally different from what they studied or what they were interested in. But it's all just about access, right? Access to information. You think about finance, and access to information is not something that's been popular for certain communities.
Hmm.
I know you've even helped me as a young player and now as a professional manage money and understand the decision processes going in, but also releasing information to say, did
Hmm.
you know this was going on? Did you know
Hmm.
this is how rich people
Hmm.
spend their money?
Hmm.
So is there one like fact or one thing that you can just say to the audience about, money management? And, when you think about the access to information, what's something that somebody should be doing or thinking about right now?
So you hear all the time, knowledge is power, right? And we hear it and it becomes cheesy and cliche. Sit down with someone that can help you because you don't know what you don't know, right? And I think the word ignorance is always looked at as a negative term, right? But it's not. You can be ignorant to anything. You don't want to go into a situation blind. And so sit down with somebody who is licensed and that can help you and can help you understand what investing your money and then generational wealth really looks like. I think for a lot of us, we all have the mindset, I want to fill my money and I'm living check to check. That's a whole different dynamic when you step outside of that box, if that makes sense. Um, so sit down with somebody, become more educated and more knowledgeable on what your goals are.
What's one of the best investment tools right now? Obviously, markets are dancing a little bit. Different things have happened, but is there
Put me on
any
the spot, Rod.
any
Okay,
specific?
I can't speak product here on recorded lines, man. I think that tax-free investments are a place where you want to have your money. I think a lot of people have their money in taxable accounts, brokerage accounts. Your 401k is tax deferred. Focusing on putting your money in tax-free buckets, if that makes sense, because your retirement income does not come from one golden bucket of money. It comes from multiple sources of income. Understanding how those accounts are going to be taxed and how they're going to be liquidated if and when you need access to the money is huge, if that makes sense.
Mhm, mhm. No, that's a great tip. I think, yeah, again, at least speaking for our community, let's just access to information, man. I'm telling you, like, the
Hmm.
more we know, the better we can do and to create, again, that generational wealth pipeline. Um,
Hmm.
And so
But then also building trust too with each other. But yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, 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 no. I like that. Let's talk about that
Mhm.
trust factor, right? I mean,
I mean, typically in the African American community, we hear all the horror stories. We're
yeah,
like, man, I hear it a lot. I don't want to give you all my money. And I'm like, bro, you're not giving it to me. This is your money. It's an investment, right? Becoming more comfortable with investing your money and understanding what it looks like is huge. But it's also, more guys who look like me in our industry, building that trust relationship with other people who need our help. But yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so I'm gonna bring this on home because I appreciate your time and I know you're a busy man. But when you think about your journey, all the way from high school, Highland Springs to Matha to Robert Morris to the multiple countries and teams you played for, what has basketball done for you, as far as like aiding your transition and the skills that you learned from the game? You know, what are some things that are transferable that you can now say, I'm glad the game taught me this because now my field XYZ.
it's a great question. So basketball has done everything to answer your question. And I know that seems very general and broad, but in a particular area of learning how to work in teams is attractive to other, companies. So if you can't work with other people, you can't work at all. But understanding discipline, timing, showing up on time, if that makes sense. I think a lot of people, when you learn about practicing at the college level, you can't be late. All of those things that you kind of condition yourself to doing, they transition to, corporate America. You and I, we still playing some of those 6 a.m. runs. We're able to do that because in college, you're getting your butt up at 6 in the morning and you running, you lifting. Those things become a lifestyle. And so I encourage everyone to just use what you've had in the past through basketball, if that makes sense. If you're an athlete or a basketball player.
Absolutely. That's great, brother. We're going to get out of here with some quick hitters. I'm just going to ask some quick questions. You can just give quick answers. Favorite basketball player?
I have a few, but Michael Jordan, Allen Iverson.
Okay, since we're there. Okay, so who's the best basketball player ever? Since we're there.
Oh my God! So this is not going to be a quick question or answer. We can talk about this for 10 hours. Best overall basketball player ever.
Uh,
The game has evolved and changed, and I'm gonna get killed for this, but LeBron James is just unbelievable.
absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you. So we even got to
I'm
talk
sure you
about
do. I'm
this.
sure you do. I'm sure you do.
What's the number one most memorable basketball moment you ever had?
Um, Shoot, I don't have one winning a championship in Dominican Republic.
Awesome. And then what is if you could have a dinner with five people, right, that you need at your table. It can be athletes, anybody. Who are you inviting to that dinner?
My mom and dad, that's two. My two children, and Jesus Christ.
All right. Yeah, that's a good table. That's a good
Hey,
table.
listen, we're gonna eat good.
It's a good table. Well, man, look, Mo, I appreciate you, brother, for taking the time out. Everybody, you can tune into the Transition Game podcast on Sundays at 8 p.m. Again, thank you to our guest, Maurice Carter. We'll make sure that if you guys have any questions or follow up for him or about his industry, we'll find ways to connect. But again, Mo, thank you for your time and we appreciate it.
Thank you, bro. Proud of you, Rod. Thank you, man.